in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel. Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful. Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous.
Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Saturday morning with Esther and Phil, and we've got an exciting show coming up for you today.
Who should be paying for the care of your children? That's a question we'll be asking in today's childcare debate.
We'll also be joined by Andrew Bridgen MP, who has just launched a lawsuit against Matt Hancock MP.
We'll be taking a dive into the UK's top taxpayers with the person who's compiled the list.
And of course, we want to hear from you. In fact, we're also going to be speaking to 3 GB viewers this morning about their big issues of the week. And as always, email us on gbviews at GB News or tweet us at GB News. Tell us your views on what we're talking about today. But first, here's the latest news with Bethany.
Esther and Philip, thank you. Good morning to you. It's 1 minute past 10. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Flybe has cancelled all flights after collapsing, with the British airline going into administration. The UK's Civil Aviation Authority is urging people who booked flights with the regional carrier not to travel to airports. Flybe returned to the skies last April after it collapsed in 2020 and was operating up to 530 flights per week across 23 routes. The government says its immediate priority is to support staff and those who've been left stranded. Travel expert Simon Calder says hundreds of people have lost their jobs.
I have a great deal of sympathy for the thousands of people booked today to fly on Flybe who are now having to make other plans. Do not go to the airport is the message from the Civil Aviation Authority. But also, of course, for the hundreds of staff who are waking up to discover the airline they worked with until yesterday no longer exists.
Graphic body cam footage has been released in the US showing police in Memphis beating a black man who died 3 days later. A warning, some people may find the following video distressing.
Get your hand! Mom! Mom! Hey, give your hands!
29-year-old Tyree Nichols was kicked, punched and pepper sprayed as he cried out for his mother. 5 black officers have been sacked and are facing murder charges. President Joe Biden says he's outraged and has called for an end to police misconduct.
Please don't shoot me dead, I got my hands above my head. Please don't shoot me dead, I got my hands above my head.
Well, that video has sparked renewed protests about police brutality towards black people. Demonstrations have been held across several cities, including Memphis and New York. In Times Square, a number of people have been arrested after some activists vandalised police cars, smashing in the windscreen. In other news, the Israeli military is boosting its forces along the West Bank after Palestinians shot and killed 7 people outside a synagogue in Jerusalem. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited the scene last night and urged his people not to take the law into their own hands. The attack coincided with International Holocaust Memorial Day. A day earlier, at least 9 Palestinians were killed in a raid on the West Bank. The UK's Foreign Secretary James Cleverly described the incident as appalling. The United Nations has accused Russia of breaching the rules around child protection by giving Ukrainian child refugees Russian passports and putting them up for adoption. Meanwhile, Ukraine's president is warning the situation at the front line of the war is extremely acute, especially in the eastern region of Donetsk. Volodymyr Zelensky says the nearby city of Bakhmut has been pulverized by repeated Russian attacks. Moscow's increased offensive follows the West's decision to promise hundreds of battle tanks and drones to support Ukraine. Back here in the UK, a former Conservative Party chair says a number of members feel they were denied a vote over whether Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. In an interview with GB News, Sir Jake Berry says Mr Sunak should have held an endorsement vote to show he had the support of the membership during the summer leadership contest. The full interview will air in Gloria Meets at 6 p.m. tomorrow.
I think even though he absolutely got the majority of members of Parliament, the Conservative members of Parliament, and I support him as Prime Minister and everything he does, there is a challenge he has, is even if it's not true, there's a perception of the Conservative Parliamentary Party now being disconnected from our membership because we didn't have that, even if it was a sort of endorsement vote.
Sir Keir Starmer will shortly address London Labour's annual conference today. The Labour leader is expected to emphasise how the party has changed under his leadership and that never again will Labour be a party of protest, not public service. Sir Keir will also vow that his party will put country first and party second. He'll also speak on a number of issues, including the need to tackle anti-Semitism and support for NATO and the NHS. The Metropolitan Police says a member of the British Army has been charged with terror offences over 2 incidents in Staffordshire in 2021 and earlier this year. 21-year-old Daniel Abed Khalif is charged with an attempt to elicit information to prepare an act of terrorism. He's also accused of placing an article with the intention or belief that it will likely explode and cause personal injury or damage. Khalif will appear at Westminster Magistrates Court later today. You're up to date on GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens now. It's back to Esther and Philip.
Thanks, Bethany. And now to take a look through the papers this morning, we're delighted to be joined in the studio by founder and CEO of Downtown in Business, Frank McKenna, and broadcaster Paula London. So, Frank, turn to you first. What have you seen?
Well, I thought it was quite interesting that the old crooner Rod Stewart got in touch with... he's obviously... He's getting on his Rod. So he meant to phone GB News, but got in touch with the wrong television channel. But he was phoning in to say that he was really concerned about the NHS and the difficulties and challenges that it faces. And, he explained the fact that he'd been a lifelong Conservative voter, but he thought that there was a urgent need for change because he thinks a new Labour government can potentially start to sort the NHS out. Now, the serious point about this is that, in a sense, I think he's right, in that the Labour Party would be more trusted to sort out the NHS. As soon as the Conservative Party start talking about reform, change, introducing some private provision to help out, they're accused of wanting to privatise the NHS and absolutely scrap it. So in that sense, he's correct. And I think the other thing is that with Wes Streeting as the Shadow Health Secretary now, you can see Labour starting to map out that reform programme. And, of course, they're not getting the suspicion from the voters that a Conservative government do. But
it's a bit sad, that, in a way, isn't it? You're saying Labour could go in there by stealth.
Yep.
People won't think it will transform it, but actually it will. And I always say, though, Rod Stewart, I always think your friends can be your harshest critics, which is was, but I'd also say to Labour, if he changes his wives or if he changes political parties as often as he changes his wives, he'll be on to the Lib Dems before you know it.
But I think, you've got to be careful as a Tory party, because the other reason you upset Rod is apparently Matt Hancock's favourite karaoke song is Do You Think I'm Sexy? And I can imagine he absolutely killed that. But as I say, getting back to the serious point, I do think it's a bit like the economy. The Tories are always better trusted with the economy. Labour is better trusted with the NHS. If we are to have an NHS that is fit for purpose in the 21st century, it needs huge reform. We can't just continue to throw more money at it. The country hasn't got more money. We've got to look at the waste that happens in the NHS, which is huge. We've got to look at a far better integrated process between care, the NHS and prevention. And we do need to tackle some of the self-interest within that organisation. I think Labour can do that.
Yesterday we had Sir John Redwood on the show, who asked a parliamentary question, which we were staggered by yesterday, which showed that the NHS had recruited, since 2019, an extra 115,000 non-medical staff.
Yes.
And that the non-medical staff in the NHS now totalled 1,117,000, which I find just beggars belief to me.
That's not medical staff in the NHS. That is non-medical staff.
My question is, would Labour... I think a lot of what you've said I absolutely agree with, but would Labour upset the unions, because obviously lots of those people are union members, by saying we need to get rid of all these non-medical staff in order to put it on the front-line medical staff? Would they be prepared to take those tough decisions?
I think Wes Streeting would. And I think the other thing is, Phil, that you've got to get to a situation now where the NHS is for the patients and the customers, not for the people who work there. And I'm not talking about the nurses and frontline staff, because as much as they're talking about pay, the issues that nurses talk to me about is the pressure they're under, because absolutely the recruitment process is skewered. You're getting lots of pen pushers, lots of middle managers, and not enough people on the front line.
Paula, what's caught your eye?
I was going to talk about the NHS a little bit to add. I understand there's 115,000 non-medical staff under the Conservative. I think there'll be a lot more under Labour. They would want more inclusive, and diversity officers, for sure. There's also a very big problem with medical tourism that's not being addressed, especially the London hospitals. They write off millions and millions and millions of pounds a year.
This is people are flying into the country.
Yeah, I think there's quite a large percentage of ladies that are having babies. I think it's about 10%, which is high, that are not from this country, that are flying here to have, medical. It's not just pregnancy, they can have operations and they're just not getting the money. I don't believe Labour would cut back on that
at all. That's gone quiet. I remember that being in the papers a lot a few years ago. People were saying, sort of an easy jet or whatever, Ryanair flying over and having this medical treatment, and that needs to be looked into.
Yeah, it needs to be looked into a lot more, especially in London. There's a lot of fantastic doctors in London, some of the best doctors in the world, so people are coming over and having free treatment. So that needs to be looked at.
But your story today?
My story is Jeremy Hunt. He's obviously trying to get money from anywhere at the moment, and I feel like he's looking at the wrong target. Older people, I always have the most sympathy for older people. Like my late father's generation, he had a job at 14. Even myself, I had a paper round, I worked at school. after school and a newsagent, a lot of the millennials and, well, Generation Z more, don't have the work ethic. They've never actually started to work. So he should be concentrating on getting those people to work, giving them a work ethic, rather than getting older people back to work.
So was this to do with the possibility of the increase maybe in pension age, or the rate at which the pension's going to increase? And so they were saying they wouldn't get money for a little bit longer. Is that what you're talking about there? And therefore, instead of them paying more into the pot, you're saying, do we need people, students, for as long as they are? Couldn't more people be working at an earlier age?
I think we definitely need more money in the pot per se, but in France, their retirement age is 62. Why do our old people have to work till 68 when a lot of young people have never even started to work? And he also wants to get a lot of mothers back to work, but he's not thinking that childcare is very expensive, and 85% of the childcare can be paid for by the government only if you get universal credit. So it's not gonna work.
We're going to have a debate about that.
Yeah.
On the show later on about childcare and everything.
And who should be paying the costs?
And exactly.
Families, the state, who should be paying the cost for that?
What was your...
Well, I had a totally different story, a very, very sad story, and it was really talking about the woeful weaknesses within our immigration system, which we saw in the travesty and which was revealed when we saw Thomas Roberts, the young aspiring Marine, being stabbed over an e-scooter by this lad who'd come into the country. I say lad, he is a man, but he got in pretending to be a 14-year-old, an unaccompanied child. And then when you look into this, what this guy had done, he'd killed 2 other people before coming into this country, sentenced to 20 years in his absence, and yet we had let him in. And really, the checks weren't good enough. We need now to be saying, who are these unaccompanied kids coming in? I remember at the time people saying, these guys are muscular, they've all got facial hair, they cannot be 14, 15, they have to be in the 30s. And even the Home Office said they had reason to believe he wasn't 14, but unless they strongly suspected he was over 25, they couldn't do anything. But what a tragedy.
I've got a good point to make about that. I was speaking to a doctor and he said there is a very easy way to stop this happening. When you have an X-ray on your wrist or your hand, you can tell if you're 19 years of age or younger or older. So someone can say that they're 15 and they're definitely over 19, and then they could just end off.
That's what they're going to bring in. That's what, and
oh,
that's
really?
what they should
They are
be
looking
doing.
to look at dental records and bone structures and things like that. They are looking to it.
But this is apparently black or white. You know, dental. I think there's some problem
Wrist
with dental.
and hand, you're spot on.
But we can't carry on and like this. And actually, I think there's a huge proportion of people who claim to be children when they come here who turn out not to be. It's quite a large proportion.
Yeah, it was. It was huge. It was 66% of the cases challenged. 66% proved that they weren't under
got to come
18.
up with a much
that's
better
huge.
system,
1,600 in the year 21.
Yeah, we've got to get a much better system in terms of being able to handle these applications, get them through the system far quicker. And, you know, the backlog now is ridiculous. Again, it comes back to resource in a sense, but surely we can put processes in place that make it far better than what we've got at this moment in time.
Thank you both. We want you to stay for this next section because this week Michael Gove told political leaders in the north of England he will harness the spirit of Thatcherism to raise living standards in the regions.
The Levelling Up Secretary told the Convention of the North, a major gathering of political and business leaders in Manchester, the former Prime Minister was an inspiration for the policy.
His speech followed calls by northern leaders to enshrine levelling up in law. Joining us now is Lancashire County Council's Labour opposition leader, Azhar Ali. Councillor Ali, thank you so much indeed for joining us this morning. We appreciate your time. I mean, what do you make of the government's levelling up agenda and how it's going about it?
Well, actually, good morning, first of all. I mean, it's interesting you said that he's going to enshrine it in law and he's going to use Thatcher's principles. But I grew up in the 80s and Thatcher decimated the textile industry and the industries in East Lancashire. So I hope it's not those sort of principles that he's going to use. In terms of levelling up in Lancashire, it's been a complete sham because we've lost over £1 billion in Lancashire over the last 12 years and we've had, 200 million back. And that's a massive gap of 800 million. And major infrastructure projects like the Skem train station, like the Polton-Fleetwood link, the Colne-Skipton line, they're not even getting a mention. And we're getting projects, smaller projects, and then you've got local authorities competing against each other, trying to get some of the scraps. and that is not the way to level up the north of England.
Now, I think Azar, Michael Gove was talking about the success of the Docklands in London, how you'd put laws or rules in place and how you'd let private enterprise take over. And you're saying that's what we're doing. So you've got free ports in places like Merseyside. That's what they're looking to do. But as you rightly say, you have had, what is it, $250 million of support. Yes, less money than 12 years ago, because we all know that was the financial crash and we all had to tighten our belts. But aren't you pleased with the money that has come back? Because it is a significant amount that's going to support the region as we move on to the next phase.
Yeah, I welcome projects like the Eden projects because, the Labour administration at County in 2030 onto the project. It's now coming to fruition, make a massive difference in terms of regeneration and for tourism. But what really is on the ground, those major infrastructure projects, HS2, like the Jubilee line, train lines, if we got the same investment in the northwest and in Lancashire, you know very well, Esther, Skelmersdale is a town that's landlocked. There's no train connection at all. It would open up a huge opportunity to create jobs and opportunities for get industry in that area. The Colne-Skipton line, a massive opportunity to link Lancashire with Yorkshire and the wider parts of the north. Those are the big projects that we need in the north of England. What we don't need is councils fighting each other for little bits of money. And you said, do I welcome it? Yeah, of course I welcome all money. But, West Lancashire Council, Chorley Council, South Ribble Council, even Jake Berry's own Rosendale got a big fat zero from the government. That is not the way to do it. And what we need, Esther, is proper local government settlements from the government, so actually local council leaders can make decisions about local projects, and that is the best way to deal with.
Don't get me going about transport. I keep saying, can we get rid of HS2 and can we have that connection across the north of England?
Councillor Azar Ali, thank you so much indeed for joining us this morning. We really appreciate your time. Frank, I just wanted to bring you in here to respond to what Azar had said. I mean, what do you feel about that? I mean, I feel the government are in a bit of a no-win situation because, of course, it was George Osborne who started the whole thing about Northern Powerhouse and Boris Johnson who went on about levelling up and actually put the whole thing about regenerating the North on the political agenda. Now, there's two ways of looking at it. One is that they haven't delivered people's expectations. The other way is to say, well, they've raised expectations so much that they were never going to be able to do it, and now they're being criticised. Even though they're doing a lot, they're just being criticised because they can never meet people's expectations. Which camp are you in about?
Yeah, well, either way, you can't have much sympathy for the government because they were the ones who set the targets, set the objectives, and have said they're going to level up. But if I could just give the example of what this levelling up fund actually is, and it is a pittance, really. It's £2 billion awarded for 100.
I'm loving £2 billion is a pittance.
For 100 projects. 100 projects. Tesla have just invested $3.6 billion for one of their factories to improve innovation. If you're serious about levelling up, then I think there's a whole swathe of things you need to do, not just about money. I thought the point that you made, actually, Esther, about getting private sector involvement, private sector investment, and working in partnership with local authorities, local governments and others. That's the way Manchester regenerated. That's the way the docks regenerated in London and Liverpool. But I think the government's got itself on the hook, hasn't it, by saying, we're going to level up. All those Red Wall seats were won partly on the basis that Boris was saying, we're going to throw loads of money at you. The money isn't there, particularly post-COVID, so we've got to come up with a new settlement.
Frank, Paula, thank you very much. We're going to see you at 11 o'clock.
Certainly are.
But coming up, we'll be looking at Britain's top taxpayers and finding out why new car sales in the UK have fallen off a cliff. So stay with us.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 23 minutes past 10. Now, you've heard of the rich list, but our big earners aren't always our big contributors. Yesterday, The Times released their top tax list, measuring who has contributed the most to the Exchequer last year.
You might be shocked at who reached number one spot. We're joined now by Robert Watts from the Sunday Times. Robert, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We've got somebody who seems to have gone, in pop terms, straight in at number one. What do we know about your new chart topper?
This guy's absolutely intriguing. His name is Alex Gurko. He only moved to the UK in 2006 from Moscow. He's a mathematician geek, I'm told, is how people who met him describe him. He's made an absolute fortune out of financial trading. And contributed a staggering £487 million to the public finances in a year, over the past year. Part of it is about a £1.3 billion dividend his company XTX has paid. But he doesn't just pay a lot of tax. He's given £60 million to charity that we've been able to find. He's passionate about maths and is funding extra classes for secondary school kids in British schools. And he's also no lover of Vladimir Putin. He's been very critical about the war in Ukraine. And just before Christmas, after a protracted battle with the Russian authorities, he's renounced his Russian citizenship. This is a man who could have been one of Russia's greatest wealth creators in their history, but instead he's here creating jobs and paying a lot of tax.
Robert, how do you know how much tax people are paying? I mean, everyone always says, well, this is, it's all private. We've had a lot of controversy about this in politics over the last week or so. How do you know how much tax these people are paying?
So we look at identifiable tax with most of our 100 entries, which are all live now on the Times website. You can go and have a look. So what that means is a big trawl through accounts filed at Companies House. We can see the corporation tax those companies are paying. We can see the payroll taxes they're paying, so the employer's national insurance. And then some companies feel so passionately about their contribution and the fact that they feel that often people don't recognise the contribution in terms of taxes they pay, that they publish much greater detail about the taxes they pay, be they gambling duty in terms of the big gambling firms or business rates, things like that as well. And then some people, when they come to us, they also unbelievably share their tax returns with us because they feel it's very important that their contribution is shown. Because often I spend much of my time compiling in the Sunday Times Rich List, and the two lists are very, very different. There are lots of people who appear very, very high up the Sunday Times Rich List who don't make the tax list, partly because we can't see it because we can't identify it, but partly also because they may not be paying much tax here in the UK. Their businesses overseas, they've not created a lot of jobs necessarily, set up their own businesses while they've been here. They're enjoying life in the UK, and perhaps they'll pay a bit of stamp duty on that mansion they bought in Belgravia, or from employing payroll costs and employing staff, but they don't actually pay as much tax when they're here as some of these great legacy private sector businesses that have been going for decades that actually are the backbone of the tax list.
We've got a minute or so left here. Can you tell us any surprises then in this list? Who's sort of bounced in from different sectors, the showbiz sector, writing sector, music sector?
I was quite struck by Sting. 70 plus years old. He's just sold his back catalogue for around £200 million from The Police and as a solo artist. He features this year. We're starting to see those payments trickle through his companies. J.K. Rowling, the Harry Potter writer, she makes this list. She's very proudly pays all her earnings through the self-assessment. But all human life is here, it seems. We've got scrap metal billionaires. We've got people who've made an absolute fortune out of stair lifts and who are paying a lot of tax.
Robert Watts. Can I say thank you very much indeed. We were intrigued by this list and we wanted to get the person who'd compiled it on the show. So thank you very much indeed. I also like the little extra bits he gave. So J.K. Rowling could pay for 293 tax inspectors. Tim Martin could have paid for 2.5 million potholes to be filled. It was saying how much they'd paid.
It certainly seemed that Sting had been stung, hadn't he, with his tax bill. The thing is, somebody said to me once, I thought it was a really good idea, that the people on the top of this list should be in the honours list each year. And they said, because what they said is if people who were at the top of this list were given honours, fewer of the really rich people would want to avoid paying tax. They'd all be clamouring to pay as much tax as possible to get the honour. I just thought it might be quite a good idea.
And I love the way Tim Martin says he named his business J.D. Weatherspoon after the teacher who said he'd fail. And there he is in the top list of people.
Absolutely. Anyway, the number of new cars made in the UK has sunk to its lowest level for 66 years. And the sales of new cars has also hit a 30-year slump.
Motoring journalist and car dealer Danny Kelly joins us now to discuss this. So what is going on?
Well, it's peculiar. Depending on your tabloid of choice, it's all down to Brexit, or potentially it's down to a global slowdown. It's actually halved since the 2016 referendum. And I'm going to look at this objectively, which unfortunately a lot of people, when it comes to the Brexit referendum, have lost the ability to do so. It's halved. So there's around about 780,000 new cars rolling off the production lines in the UK. 2016, it was more or less double. Now, one of the big blows to the UK motor trade was when Honda pulled out their European plant in Swindon. And they, at the time, everyone threw the question, was it Brexit? And they dispassionately said, look, we're not getting involved with politics. And so they said it's actually not to do with Brexit. But that resulted in 160,000 fewer cars. Now, the Ellesmere Port plant, Vauxhall, only in the last 12 months or so, they've stopped making production cars like the Vauxhall Astra. And they've turned their investment towards electronic vans. And don't forget, Esther and Phil, this is a global issue. There are supply chain problems for semiconductors that are still crippling the new car game. Jaguar Land Rover is thriving. The Mini plant in Oxford is thriving. They're producing 800-odd cars a day. JLR are producing more than that. You've got the Nissan plant in Sunderland that, again, everyone thought was going to be a casualty of Brexit, but the government threw a few bob their way and they managed to stay in the United Kingdom. But what is sad was a British startup called British, I've forgotten the name, British Vision, I think, or so. It's about batteries, and it was a brand new startup.
British Volt,
wasn't it?
Yes, thank you for bailing me out on national television. How embarrassing. And I'm the one that's supposed to be the motoring journalist. So they were bailed out. Sorry, they weren't bailed out, so that's a massive blow for the future, because everything's going electric. But I don't think it's to do with Brexit personally. I just think that the semiconductor shortage, which is a global issue, the COVID situation in China, because lots of parts are made in China, that, of course, has been a kick in the teeth as well for UK car manufacturing. But I tell you what, if you can get a new car People are waiting 12 months for certain models. It's
Well,
that
we were
sort of
going to
short
ask that.
plan.
Is that the reason for really this drop in buying brand new cars? Just you can't get hold of them. And does that mean second-hand cars sales are going through the roof?
Esther, well, what a great question, because that's my game, used cars. I tell you what, because of the new car supply shortage, used cars have skyrocketed. The trajectory is northwards, and the prices are going through the roof. And just curiously, today it was announced that used car sales for electric cars, they have plummeted in value. In fact, top-of-the-range Teslas, Esther and Phil, have plummeted in value by £14,000 over the last 4 months because the market confidence has been shattered.
And do you think that the government should delay the ban on petrol and diesel cars? I mean, I'm thinking that in sort of 2029, if you buy a new diesel and petrol car, that's going to go up in value after there's a ban on new cars, isn't it? I mean, there's going to be a massive market for used petrol and diesel cars.
And that ban is what, 2030?
2030, yeah. Do you think the government should delay that ban, Danny?
Well, do you know the crazy thing is, Phil? I do. Because the European Union said the ban was 2035. Now, when Boris Johnson announced this in 2020, that we were going to bring it forward by 5 years, I thought, what the hell are you doing? You know, Brexit is supposed to be about us being more flexible and working on behalf of the consumer. And what you're doing is bringing forward a problem by 5 years. I still don't know why he announced it. I think what Rishi Sunak should do is grow a big pair and say, look, we've got this slightly wrong. We're gonna form ourselves back with our colleagues in the European Union,
Danny,
because 5 years is a massive difference.
Danny, just a very, very quick question. Are you a fan of Alexei Sale?
My lookalike, you mean? Yes. Although, do you know, Esther, when I was thinner, I used to get called Andre Agassi, but now I put weight on, it's Alexei Sale, yeah.
Well, John's got a brand new motor. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Danny, thank you so much for joining us. We'll let you get back and sell a few more cars. Coming up, get your knife and fork at the ready. We'll be live at the #1 gastropub in the UK. And also in the next hour, we'll be speaking to Andrew Bridgen MP and the lawsuit he's levelling on Matt Hancock. So stay with us.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous.
Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome back. Here we are. Government plans to target out-of-work parents in a drive to boost employment and have faced criticism for not also including detail on how they would support parents with childcare needs.
Around 1.5 million women are not in work because they're looking after their family, compared with just 240,000 men.
So joining us now is journalist Louise Perry and Harriet Butterworth, Managing Director of Cottontail's Day Nursery. So I'll start with you, Harriet, looking at this and looking at how much government has done already to support parents with their children. So we've got childcare offer has doubled for 3 and 4-year-olds, introduced 15 hours of free childcare a week, and for disadvantaged 2-year-olds and for people on universal credit, they can claim up to 85% of their childcare costs. So isn't government doing a lot at the moment to help parents?
No, they're sat with their hands in their ears and they're covering their eyes. We've been campaigning with lots of other people, Champagne Nurseries on Lemonade funding, Pregnant and Screwed, because the funding that the government currently offer is nowhere near what it costs for us to operate. So for a 3-year-old funding, so your universal 30 hours, the government pay in Warrington £4.50 for an hour. Okay, my private rate is £6.40 an hour. This is an underfund of over £60,000 across the year just for term time only. Now, what parents do we know that work term time only? I was a teacher and even I didn't work just term time only. So what they're offering doesn't go far enough. It's all span. It's all, things like tax-free childcare actually isn't tax-free childcare. It's capped at £2,000. It doesn't come close to the tax contribution that's being offered. And we've got working parents who are actively giving up their childcare hours because they cannot afford to.
So, Harriet, the 20 billion support that the government's handing over isn't enough. You'd like more for your business. Shouldn't parents be paying a little bit more if it is their children?
Well, it's when it costs more than your mortgage for your child to be cared for, and with obviously grandparents having to work until they're older because the retirement age is increasing and increasing again. It's not feasible. It's not feasible for them to afford to work. It doesn't pay to work as it currently stands at the moment.
And maybe you could have less children, and then it would pay.
We're in the 20th century. It's a case of, if you want children, you want a family, you should be able to have that right as freedom.
It's a right.
We've got a massive gender gap within the workforce as it is, a gender pay gap, and that's going to increase further. We're returning to the 1970s. Why aren't we moving forward with this? Why aren't we working with providers to provide affordable, flexible childcare, and in return, the economy will receive that in taxation through workers?
So, Louise, Harriet thinks that having children should be a right and that they've got a right to expect the state to contribute to their childcare fees to help pay for them so they can get back to work. Do you agree with what Harriet says?
I think it's really important for people to have children on a societal level, because if we don't keep having children, who are going to be the taxpayers of the future? Who are going to pay for pensions, the NHS, etc.? This isn't just parents indulging themselves by having children. They're actually performing a sort of societal duty. And I completely agree with Harriet that the government are not helping parents as much as they should. I mean, my view is that just pouring money into nurseries shouldn't be the only thing that we should be doing, because I think actually that ends up reducing choice for parents often. I think that it would be better to have, say, tax breaks or cash transfers or whatever, which make it easier for parents to stay home part-time or full-time if they want to. I don't think the only option should be daycare. But I also think, the influx of women into the workforce in the last 100 years has been really good for the economy, right? It's massively boosted GDP. But one of the things downstream of that is that it's now much more difficult to live on a single income in the way that it used to be. So what you often find is parents who are actually earning, reasonably good money, like just to break even with the cost of nursery fees, you're often talking earning, 30k in London, something like that. So we're not talking about rock bottom wages here. We're talking about like normal public sector wages, which can't pay for nursery fees. And the really outrageous thing that's going on here is to do with housing, it's to do with the cost of living.
But if we just take it back a little bit and look at maybe, the family structure, who's helping to pay, how many children can you afford to have? Some people haven't had children, or they've had less children because they thought, well, you know what, I can't pay for this childcare, so I will work it within the family unit who can look after my children. And none of this seems to be coming into your discussion at all, particularly you, Harriet.
Well, no, the end of the day, as a family, it's up to you if you want to have children or not. Yes, there is a financial
and if you can
consideration.
afford them.
Yeah, but then if that's the case, then we wouldn't have an economy for the future. We wouldn't have, the amount of people that we have in the economy, and it wouldn't continue to grow, and we wouldn't have a skilled workforce, and we'd have a buoyant childcare sector and lots of children within areas where the income is far greater. And so therefore you've got an economic
Harriet, if the population of the UK was going down, I might say you had a point, but the population is going up. So I don't really see where you're going with your argument.
Well, I think it's up to you if you want to have children. If that's the case, then we're moving backwards. We're going back into, we're going back into the 1970s with women not working. We're going back reverse. And that's not why I bring my children into the world. I choose to have my children because I want to show them love. I want to show them respect. I want them to have a future. And it's up to us as citizens now to make a future for our children. So I don't understand the argument of why, well, if you can't afford children, don't have them. I think it's a case of, well, everybody has a right. And if look at this, public sector. So I was a teacher. My wages as a teacher are less than I could earn if I went and worked for Amazon. Now,
Louise, let me bring Louise into this. Louise, if the government were to, the government's borrowing huge amounts of money every year. It can't afford to its current levels of public expenditure. So if the government were to prioritise more on childcare, where should it take the money from? I mean, which budget should it cut in order to pay for extra on childcare? Because all that the government ever gets from everybody is it should be spending more on our sector.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I don't believe in the magic money tree. Clearly, it is the case that we have to be thinking about budgeting, but also we need to be thinking about the long term, which unfortunately, democratic system doesn't always favour. And the truth is that actually we've been below replacement birth rates for half a century, and most countries in the world now have below replacement birth rates. The way that we've been able to keep the population growing has been through mass immigration, which causes all sorts of political, social problems down the line. We actually really need parents to be investing the enormous amount of money, effort, time that it requires to raise children, and not just raise them, but raise them well. Because actually there are all sorts of costs to the government down the line if we have children with, say, antisocial behaviour, mental health problems, all of the things that are a consequence of not having a loving, stable home. So it's hugely in the government's interest and in all of our interests to look after children properly and to make sure that parents are properly supported.
Absolutely,
it is expensive.
and we all agree with that. Louise Perry, thank you very much indeed, and Harriet Butterworth as well. Thank you for joining us today. We've got a couple of views come in straight away from that. Stuart has said, if you can't afford kids, then you shouldn't be having them. It's not for the taxpayer and other people to be looking after other people's children's.
And we were discussing about the Levelling Up Fund earlier. Tony says, why have Tories allowed England to become a collection of competing regions scrapping for money? England isn't even recognised as a nation on the political map.
And I like this one from Graham. He said, Esther is correct.
No, that's why I like that. That's why I like it, because he started off by saying Esther is correct.
That's how you get your view read out. What the North needs are connections west to east. Both rail and roads need to be improved vastly. The government needs to stop always thinking about north to south. We need north-west, north-east connectivity. Graham, spot on.
Yeah, we certainly agree with that. Keep those views coming in. We want to hear them. Now, we're now going to a pub in Lancashire. It pains me to say it. I don't really want to say it, to be perfectly honest. But apparently, I'm told that you have to go to Lancashire if you're looking for great food. I can't believe this is true, that you've got to go to Lancashire. Has anyone been to Whitby for fish and chips? Or anyway, I'm being told you've got to go to Lancashire for great food. I can't bring myself to say it.
But if you've looked in the top 50 gastropubs list, you'll find that there are 3 pubs there from Clitheroe. They have made the cut, that's why.
Yeah, well, we're joined now by Stosi Mahdi, the chef and co-founder of the #1 gastropub in the UK, the Parker's Arms. So, thank you so much for joining us. What makes the Parker's Arms such a fantastic pub?
Well, I think the whole thing about the gastropubs list is it celebrates pubs that do great food, but also you have to truly respect the fundamental values of what a pub is and what its functions are. Well, at the Parker's Arms, you can have a fantastic 3-course meal, but you can also come in muddy boots with your dog, sit at the bar, have a drink, a great pint or half pint of ale, some wonderful wine, a packet of crisps, and chat to the person behind the bar. It's very casual, very relaxed, but the food is what it's really all about, because it's very rural and we're in the middle of nowhere.
Now, I understand you're famous for your pies. I must say I'm partial
We are.
to it. I'm partial, as you can probably tell from the size of me, I'm partial to a good pie. So what makes your pie so special? I'm tempted by this.
Well, I can tell you almost 99.9% of our customers are partial to pies, which is one of the reasons I think they are so famous. The thing about our pies is that I think people sort of think that pies are a very simple thing to achieve and very sort of, not to be celebrated. At the Parker's Arms, pies are a very important thing. We make everything from scratch on premises. So if we're doing a mutton pie, which is one of our most famous pies, we get wonderful mutton or lamb from a local farm 3 miles away. We get the animal in, we butcher it down ourselves, we render the fat, which we use it to make the pastry with, and then we roast the bones to make the gravy with, and then we braise the meat and we put the offal in it. So if you're thinking steak and kidney, the mutton pie has got all the offal in with it. And because we're in the north and curries are very prevalent with Lancashire, the spices come in there. It's a big labour of love.
You can tell you're a chef telling us there how everything's done. It's amazing. Now, I've got a less than technical question for you, see, because this is where we have a household divide. I saw there in that magnificent picture of your pie that you had chips and veg. Now, I do pie, chips and veg. No, Philip has to have pie, mash and mushy peas. So, as a gastropub, which is the one you'd be advocating?
Think carefully before
we do both. We do both. So all our pies come with a choice of our very own chips or fries, depending on when the season is and what kind of potato it is, or our very, very famous creamed mash. People come all the way from Australia and New York to eat our mash. It's absolutely mental. And we have mushy peas when we have...
There will be no fallout in our family because we can both go there. I can have the chips and he can have the mash, thank goodness.
Absolutely. It's all about choice in life, isn't it? And we make sure that that is available. And we think pies are just fantastic and to be celebrated and very much part of the North. See, there's a cauliflower there. It's not all about pies, you see.
Oh, look, Stosy, Maddie, it's been fantastic speaking to you. We've got some wonderful pictures up of what you cook there and what you do there. I can see that you came out as the UK's #1 gastropub. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having us on. Thank you.
Yeah, well done, even if you are in Lancashire.
Now, we've been reading out your views, and we will continue to do so because they're fantastic. But some brave souls have decided to appear on our screen with us this week to discuss the issues which matter to them most.
If you'd like to come on our programme with the two of us, you can email in on gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews. But let's now welcome Angela Hughes, Phil Arnold and Jack Thompson. Thank you, all of you, for joining us.
So,
now, where should we start? Angela, shall we start with you, Angela, from Wales? What is it that's most concerning you at the moment? What's winding you up the most?
I'd just like to say something about the Chancellor's speech yesterday and his 5-point plan to grow the economy. I just think, first of all, I noticed point 5 was at the bottom of the list, stop the boat. And I'm sure a lot of his voters would think that that should be top priority and at the top. But all that besides, I'd just like to say, how on earth can he halve inflation and grow the economy when businesses at the moment are actually struggling with high cost of energy And yet in March, he's going to slap another 6% on them. I mean, that's going to make our businesses so uncompetitive. It's going to put the cost up for the consumers, again, keeping inflation very high. Or businesses are just going to run for the hills, and they're just going to take their businesses elsewhere. They'll move across to Ireland, possibly, where it's 12.5% and not 25%. I think it's ridiculous.
And Angela, that's why we've got you on, to put this common sense approach across. I know Jeremy Hunt does watch the show, and he needs to hear the voice of the people, what they're concerned about. I don't know if he did it in any particular order. Sorry, what was that, Angela?
I'm a lifelong Conservative voter, Esther, and I think that there's no way I'm going to ever vote for Labour. I mean, hell would have to freeze over before I voted for Labour. But I can't even see me voting for the Conservative Party ever again. And I've supported you all along. I've been out campaigning. I'm a member of the party. And I just think it's just ridiculous. There's so many other parties now that are coming up, which have got a far better idea of how to run the economy and how to run the country. The country's gone to the dogs, as far as
Angela. Let us bring in Jack there. I think we're having a bit of a crackle on the line. So Jack, over to you. What's been sort of getting your goat at the moment?
Hello, Esther. Hello, Phil. I think the main thing that's been a direct problem to me as a law student is free speech in university campuses. Universities countrywide pride themselves on being pro-free speech, and there's evidence over the past month that they're exactly against that. There was a university student studying a PhD in the University of Manchester who had that award stripped of him for holding certain beliefs. And I think universities need to pride themselves on encouraging free speech and healthy debate, and not this prison of ideas which they're turning into.
I mean, Jack, I was under the impression that, the universities had sort of rode back from being all woke and the cancel culture and all this kind of stuff. I was under the impression that universities were now saying, oh, no, we are going to allow free speech. Are you saying to us that that's a myth, that's a mirage? They might be saying that, but actually in practice they're not delivering on free speech?
Well, in 2021, Gavin Williams...
Oh, you're talking of no free speech.
No free speech.
Jack, we've stopped you. So we've got...
Same thing.
We've got...
It's literally 2 years later, nothing's changed. I've had experiences in my university where I'm by teachers and lecturers.
OK, look, that connection's not going too well
there, Jack. For a second, Jack. We were just criticising universities for no free speech, and then we denied you your free speech on our channel, so we apologise for that. Let's bring in Phil Arnold from Sheffield. Phil, what's getting you wound up at the moment?
This immigration. I basically don't think they're trying to stop it at all. There's no reason for it to be going on. One of your guests earlier on said that something so simple, which is unobtrusive, is you can X-ray the wrist. I'd never heard of that one. That can be done on the boat.
Yeah.
And then if they're older, they're off. They ship back home. Get back where you come from. It's not right. We've no room.
Do you think that the government not sorting out these boats coming over from France, do you think that will affect the way that people like you vote at an election? I mean, Angela was telling us earlier that, she's always voted Conservative, and now she was certainly rocking and may not. Do you think this is the issue that will determine whether people do or don't vote Conservative, Phil?
Yes, I've voted Conservative and ever since I could vote at 18. That's 40-odd years ago. Now, no way. And neither will Labour get my vote. It's got to be one of the outside parties. We need proportional representation. We've got to give these smaller parties a chance to get in, because they're the parties that can make a difference. They're not controlled by unions or big high finance and everything. They're just standalone.
See, this is why politicians need to hear more the voice of the people, what they're concerned about, what isn't working for them, and where they think they've lost touch.
I mean, Phil, can I just ask you about that? Because, you know, lots of people who are conservative, and conservative, our colleagues in Parliament would say, well, look, people like, you know, they'd say to people like you, Phil, well, look, you know, if you don't vote Conservative, you're going to end up with a Labour government. You don't want a Labour government. So how has that helped the agenda that you're interested in? Does that argument not counter to? Oh, blooming heck! I've sent him off.
It was his dog. Here he is. He's back.
I thought you'd walked off in disgust there. I thought you'd walked off in disgust there, Phil. To be honest, what do you say, Phil, to people? What do you say to people like that who say that you'll just let in a government that'll be even worse?
Yeah. So, well, yes, they need to get control back. They're just lying to us. Basically, they're lying to us. They're not doing anything at all to help us.
And so, Angela,
I will not vote Conservative again.
Angela, do you not fear letting in something that'd be even worse?
Sorry, what did you say?
Oh, I think she's on
mute.
I think she's on mute. Are you on mute, Angela?
This is like this Handforth Council meeting.
I just think that the country's just gone to the dogs. It's not the country I grew up in. And this business of trying to get people over the age of 50 back into the workplace. What about all the people who are work shy in the young work?
And I totally agree with that. Angela, I laughed when you said country's going to the dogs because I could hear Phil's dog barking in the background and it sounded as if you'd colluded together to make that happen. Look, we've had a few technical difficulties there and a dog and Phil walking off and this, that and the other. But can I say, I'm delighted, well, we're both, the station's delighted that you came on because you are the voice of the people.
And we want to hear that kind of common sense that our viewers have in spades. So thank you very much, Angela, Phil, Jack.
I'm fully in things and issues that I need to speak about.
Keep sending in your views, Angela. You keep. We could have filled the whole show with it, to be perfectly honest. Thank you. Look, thank you both. Thank you so much. We'll hopefully have you all both back on again sometime, and Jack as well. Thanks ever so much.
We are so. Did you see that? Fully prepared. I love that. They'd written all of their notes. They were all prepared. Knew what they would. It had so much more to say.
I won't want to be a canvas for election time knocking on their doors. That's for sure. Anyway, coming up in the next hour, Andrew Bridgen will be joining us and telling us about his legal action against Matt Hancock, and you certainly won't want to miss that.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and good morning. You're watching and listening to GB News. This is Saturday morning with Esther and Philip. And wow, have we got a great second hour of the show coming up today.
We'll be joined by Andrew Bridgen MP, who's just launched a lawsuit against Matt Hancock.
And how far can you travel for £23? How about a day trip to the Canary Islands? We'll be speaking to a Manchester mum who did just that.
And we'll also be taking a closer look at some of the biggest stories from the world of sport and showbiz as usual with Aidan McGee and Hayley Palmer.
And as always, we love to hear your views, whether that's live on the TV or emailing them in. And do that by going to gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at GBNews. But first, here's the latest news with Bethany.
Esther and Philip, thank you. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Flybe has cancelled all flights after collapsing, with the British airline going into administration. The UK's Civil Aviation Authority is urging people who booked flights with the regional carrier not to travel to airports. Flybe returned to the skies last April after it collapsed in 2020 and was operating up to 530 flights per week across 23 routes. The government says its immediate priority is to support staff and those who've been left stranded. Travel expert Simon Calder says hundreds of people have lost their jobs.
I have a great deal of sympathy for the thousands of people booked today to fly on Flybe who are now having to make other plans. Do not go to the airport is the message from the Civil Aviation Authority. But also, of course, for the hundreds of staff who are waking up to discover the airline they worked with until yesterday no longer exists.
Graphic body cam footage has been released in the US showing police in Memphis beating a black man who died 3 days later. A warning, some people may find the following video distressing.
Mom! Mom! Give me your hands!
29-year-old Tyree Nichols was kicked, punched and pepper sprayed as he cried out for his mother. 5 black police officers have been sacked and are facing murder charges. President Joe Biden says he's outraged and has called for an end to police misconduct.
Please don't shoot me dead, I got my hands above my head. Please don't shoot me dead, I got my hands above my head.
Well, the video has triggered fresh protests against police brutality towards black people. Demonstrations, which were mostly peaceful, have been held across several cities, including Memphis and New York. In Times Square, though, 3 people were arrested after police cars were damaged. The Israeli military is boosting its forces along the West Bank after a Palestinian shot and killed 7 people outside a synagogue in Jerusalem. A day earlier, at least 9 Palestinians were killed in a raid on the West Bank. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is urging people not to take the law into their own hands. Well, this morning, there was another suspected Palestinian shooting in Jerusalem. 2 people were injured. The United Nations has accused Russia of breaching the rules around child protection by giving Ukrainian child refugees Russian passports and putting them up for adoption. Meanwhile, Ukraine's president is warning the situation at the front line of the war is extremely acute, especially in the eastern region of Donetsk. Volodymyr Zelensky says the nearby city of Bakhmut has been pulverized by repeated Russian attacks. Moscow's increased offensive follows the West's decision to promise hundreds of battle tanks and drones to support Ukraine. Back in the UK, the Labour leader says the Conservative Party is not capable of change, the change that Britain needs, but that his party can build a fairer, greener UK. The Labour leader emphasised how the party has changed under his leadership, especially in relation to anti-Semitism, and that never again will Labour be a party of protest, not public service. Sir Keir also vowed Labour will put country first and party second.
Britain is crying out for change, crying out for decisive leadership, and we must provide it. Prove that we can be a bold, reforming government. Show not just what the Tories have done to Britain, but the Britain that Labour can build. A fairer, greener, more dynamic country, with an economy that works for everyone, not just those at the top, and a politics which trusts communities with the power to control their own destiny.
Meanwhile, a former Conservative Party chair says a number of members feel they were denied a vote over whether Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. In an interview with GB News, Sir Jake Berry says Mr Sunak should have held an endorsement vote during the summer leadership contest to show he had the support of the membership. The full interview will air in Gloria Meets at 6 p.m. tomorrow.
I think even though he absolutely got the majority of members of Parliament, the Conservative members of Parliament, and I support him as Prime Minister and everything he does, there is a challenge he has, is even if it's not true, there's a perception of the Conservative Parliamentary Party now being disconnected from our membership because we didn't have that, even if it was a sort of endorsement vote.
You're up to date on GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Esther and Philip.
Thank you there, Bethany. Look, we've had loads of views coming in, particularly about the views on childcare and who should pay, the state or the parents.
Yeah, it's pretty one-sided, actually, to be perfectly honest. I mean, literally hundreds of comments, but Ken says, why is it strange that people should look after their own children? If you can't look after them, don't have them. Carol says, why should we pay for their children? I didn't get help 30 years ago and didn't moan like they are today. They're all pretty much the same.
Yeah, Mike, why do the government pay for childcare? What's the logic in that? The family should be paying for it.
Just to put a different view, Jackie says, as a childcare provider, I can confirm funding nowhere meets the cost of childcare. 10% rise in staff wages in April being a major cost, along with other costs of living rises. Thousands of providers are therefore closing. So, but lots and lots of comments. Keep them coming in. There's absolutely hundreds of comments, particularly about that particular debate.
So now, taking a look through the papers again this hour, we are joined in the studio by founder and CEO of Downtown in Business, Frank McKenna, and broadcaster Paula London. This time, we're going to go to you, Paula, first. What caught your eye?
Hi, I saw on the front page today, Homeless Hell of Hannah Spirit. I remember growing up, she was very successful in S-Club band. She was earning about $150,000 a year in the 2000s, and now everything has gone wrong. Her landlord sold her home. She was homeless. She moved to 4 different places, friends' houses in 2 months. She was sleeping in an office. And I feel like she's not the only person going through this. There's a huge problem with housing at the moment. Now property prices, especially in London, they've gone down a little bit, but courts are helping people. There can't be you're not allowed to evict anyone now. There's something called no-fault evictions. But if the landlord is selling the home, there's nothing you can really do. So, I mean, I'm thinking in the next year or two, we're going to have a problem with stagflation. I really believe Jeremy Hunt is just dreaming if he thinks inflation's going to be halved. And I do think that property prices are going to go down a lot, though. So we can have a recession and high inflation. And that's going to help people because wages aren't going up, but the property prices have gone up so much. Landlords are now becoming greedy and pulling the rents up and up all the time. And courts are now having to help people stay in their homes. Obviously, she had a privileged, position when she started out in the working, but now apparently she's bedbound with an illness. But something needs to happen with housing. It's just crazy. I look online and people are literally trying to get £1,000 a month for literally a cupboard. It's crazy. It's really,
it was interesting in her case because it said she had 2 days to move out because the landlord wanted the property to sell it because he needed to sell the property.
Well, she should have gone to court.
And I think there is an issue, isn't there, that I suppose that the more difficult you make life for landlords, the fewer houses will be available for people to rent. And I mean, it's a difficult balance, isn't it? You want people who rent should be able to rent places that are habitable and better than some of the properties that they are at the moment. But equally, you don't want to make the regime so strict that there's fewer houses available
and
to
it's
rent.
a very difficult
balance,
picture if they had a loan on that house and it covered the costs and then they had to get a remortgaged and all of a sudden the mortgage has gone up. They think, oh, I can't anymore because I'm actually paying for somebody to live in this house, and they've changed the law. So they've gone much tighter if you're a landlord, what you can and can't claim back. So it is a complicated picture, but house prices is an issue, particularly for the younger generation, without a doubt. Frank?
Yeah, in terms of the housing crisis, obviously we need to build more homes, but we have this huge NIMBY issue. You know, everybody says we need more housing, but nobody wants them in their backyard. So that's an issue that we need to overcome, and we do need to look at our planning regime, which is antiquated to say the least. I think in terms of this particular case, though, it's a salutary lesson to young people who look now at quick book, quick fame, Instagram influencers, all that sort of thing. You know, there are lots and lots of these stories of people who earn lots of money in the younger age, never really invest it properly, and end up in this situation. Footballers, former pop stars, and as I say, these days, young people are told, make the quick buck and you'll be fine. Well, look at this.
You know,
homeless 10 years later.
When you're saying these days, you're making yourself sound like ancient.
Well, you know, I'm 40 now. 40 now, Esther.
Yeah, and
plus
the
VAT.
years left. So, and what did you see? You've got the FT in front of you.
Yeah, so listen, this story isn't going away. And again, I think it comes back to when you start to see a government that's running out of ideas, that's running out of road, situations such as this just drag on. So Nadeem Sahawi, obviously huge problems with his tax. Paul Ab was careless and forgot to pay a couple of million. Did a deal with HMRC, who this morning have admitted that when they were asked last summer if any probe was being undertaken as far as government ministers was concerned, they said no, that wasn't the case. They misled or perhaps didn't know that they were investigating Mr Sahawi's tax return. But why he wasn't sacked by the Prime Minister last week when this story emerged, I think is a further demonstration of how weak the government is. Conservative Party now, to me, the government, is a series of different pressure groups rather than a government that's collective going in one direction.
Frank, is that Nadeem Zahawi's paid £5 million towards public services in this country, which I certainly didn't, so maybe we ought to be thanking him rather than slagging him off. And I suppose the second bit is nobody's said that he's broken the law. Nobody's put him up for tax evasion or anything like that. So if anybody, are you saying that anybody who has to pay a penalty to HMRC should lose their job?
I think it's
a penalty.
I think it's I think it's the problem is, Philip, that there appears to be a smell, a whiff of the guy who's the ex-chancellor being treated differently. So I'm having to negotiate with HMRC, as many business owners are through after the COVID crisis. And I tell you now, they are not as sympathetic in dealing with small business owners as they appear to be.
Do you think? He paid £1 million penalty.
But he was careless in his tax return.
And he paid £1 million penalty.
And he's not had the sort of penalties that he'd have received with the small... If you were
avoidance is very different to evasion.
He's got offshore accounts. You know, I think this just smells a little from... The person in the street will say, if HMRC dealt with everybody as sympathetically as this, fine. But it appears to me that he has had preferential treatment. And it also appears to me that in terms of standards within Parliament, 20 years ago, he'd have been sacked.
I would say, I don't know if he has had preferential treatment, if we're all talking about it.
He got a large fine.
£5 million. But you're quite right. If he becomes a story, what you're saying, he might need to go. Frank McKenna, thank you very much indeed. Paul London, thank you very much indeed. Wow.
Now, Andrew Bridgen, who lost the Tory whip after a controversial tweet about COVID vaccines, is threatening to sue his fellow MP, Matt Hancock.
The former Health Secretary, who has also had the whip removed, accused Andrew of believing in anti-Semitic, anti-vax, anti-scientific conspiracy theories. And Andrew Bridgen joins us now. Hi, morning, Andrew. Thank you very much indeed for this. So do you want to tell us about what is happening between you and Matt Hancock at the moment? What are you doing? How are you suing him?
Well, my lawyers have written to him a very detailed letter laying out the case for defamation. It is with lawyers. The ball's very much in Matt Hancock's court. He can apologise. He can make a payment which will go to those that have been vaccine harmed, a charity, or we can take this further. It's very much up to him. I can't really comment on it a lot more than that, Esther, because otherwise my lawyers will go bonkers, quite honestly.
But Andrew, are you saying that if Matt Hancock apologises and deletes his tweet, then you would drop the lawsuit if he were to do that? Is that what you're saying?
There are 3 stipulations. They're in the letter. It's up to Matt Hancock now what he does. It'll take him some time to digest that letter. He had it last Monday. Let's see what he comes back with. But I'm quite happy to pursue the case if that's what he wants to do.
Now, look, I didn't see when you put out your original tweet that caused such controversy. I reading it, I couldn't see, from my perspective, what was anti-Semitic about it. But do you regret mentioning the vaccines in the same breath, in the same sentence as the Holocaust? I mean, in hindsight, do you think that was a mistake?
Well, there's some interesting data which was released onto the government website on Thursday. This is about the effectiveness of the booster campaign going forward. The data is very detailed. It's by age group and by risk category. And I'd just like to take you through a bit of this and let's see what your viewers think. So 40 to 49-year-olds, the mRNA booster in the autumn, healthy 40 to 49-year-olds, which most of them are, you have to vaccinate with the booster 932,500 to prevent 1 serious hospitalisation case. These are the government's own figures. So that means on a 1 in 800 having an adverse reaction to the severe adverse reaction to the booster, you'll have 1,166 serious adverse reactions to keep 1 person out of hospital with COVID. In the high risk group for the same age group, 49,800 have to be boosted. That's going to be to keep 1 person out of hospital. That's going to be 62 serious adverse events. No wonder the JCVI changed their recommendation. So no one under 50 is going to have the booster. And now we're not going to roll it out to children, which is a huge relief to me. However, when you look at the figures, it clearly shows that no one should have had the booster, because in no age group is there any net benefit against the risk of an adverse reaction from the vaccine. Even the 50 to 59-year-olds, which I'm unfortunately a member of, you'd have to boost healthy ones, 256,400. That's going to give you 320 severe adverse reactions to the booster to keep 1 person out of a serious hospitalisation from COVID. The only group that were protected in any way or weren't disadvantaged in it were the over 70s with multiple comorbidities, high risk group, where you had to vaccinate with the booster 800 to keep 1 person out of hospital with a severe from COVID. But that's exactly the same as the risk from the booster itself, 1 in 800. So there's no net benefit to anyone from the boosters. They should be stopped straight away, and we need an investigation into the excess deaths.
Yeah, look, no, I understand the point you're making, Andrew, and of course, look, I suppose it's inevitable with a vaccine programme that some people will benefit from a vaccine programme and some people will
But Philip, we're talking about in my age group, a healthy 50 to 59-year-old, you're 320 times more likely to be hospitalised due to an adverse reaction to the booster than you are from catching COVID.
We understand the argument. We understand the argument. We understand the argument that, like I say, it's a matter of. I think it's an uncontroversial fact that some people will benefit from having a vaccine and some people will get harm from having the vaccine. That's the issue is.
Yeah, but Philip, you like gambling. You want to gamble.
Well, some people do get reassured by having the vaccine. That's the point I'm making. But look, the question I asked was, do you regret mentioning these points in the same breath, in the same sentence as the Holocaust, or in hindsight, do you wish that you'd conveyed the argument in a slightly different way?
Phrased it differently.
I wouldn't wish to cause offence to any group, certainly not the Jewish group. I attended the Holocaust Memorial Service in Parliament on Thursday afternoon, and then I was met by the correspondent from the Jewish Chronicle. He agreed that there was nothing anti-Semitic about that statement, but he and I agreed that I could have phrased it better.
Okay. Now, look, I personally, I'm arguing personally, I can't see why you had the whip taken away from you, because, you know, as an MP, you should be raising concerns. It doesn't matter whether people agree or disagree with them. That's the job of members of Parliament. And like I say, I didn't see anything anti-Semitic in your tweet, whether it was wise or unwise. Were you told by the Chief Whip why you'd had the whip taken off you? Was it because of what you said about the vaccines, or was it because you mentioned the Holocaust? Because I couldn't work out why it was. Were you told why it was?
Yes, I had a text on my phone the morning of my suspension saying, "Ring me urgently," from the Chief Whip. I rang him. I didn't get a word in edgeways. He told me it was because of the mentioning the Holocaust, it was anti-Semitic, and I was immediately losing the whip, and he put the phone down on me. He then sent me through a text which basically reiterated what he'd said. There was no mention about my stance on the efficacy and safety of the vaccines. It was all about anti-Semitism. However, that narrative, especially when everyone found out 24 hours later that I was actually quoting a scientific paper from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, that narrative seemed to have shifted onto my stance on the vaccines. And I think for a Member of Parliament to be silenced for having a view on a matter, an important matter like this, which is shared by many academics and the growing evidence, is pretty unprecedented, quite honestly, and a sad indictment of the state of our democracy.
I was going to ask, do you want to come back into the party that removed the whip? I mean, you've served the party for many, many years, but do you want to come back? Or, as rumour is going around, do you want to go to the Reclaim Party?
I don't think there really is a Reclaim Party. It's more of a sort of pressure group. They have been giving me some support, and they're certainly helping me with the Bad Law project in the litigation. Esther, they can take the whip off me, but they can't stop me being a Conservative. I want to be out there helping my Conservative councillors in North West Leicestershire retain control of this council, where together we've done so much great work over the last 15 years. Longest council tax freeze in the history of the UK. 15 years, we've never put the council tax up in 15 years. Highest economic growth in the UK and one of the happiest places to live. And I want my Conservative councillors to win those elections in May. And I want to be out there on the doorsteps with them.
Just finally, and quickly if you can, Andrew, because we haven't got much time. I mean, how does it feel when you lose the Conservative whip, and how much support have you had from Conservative MPs privately?
I think quite a lot of support from quietly from the backbenches. They think the grounds were spurious, and they suspect the motives. So yeah, quite a lot. And I understand that the 1922 committee may be doing some lobbying on my behalf with the Chief Whip and Number 10, probably as we speak.
Well, thank you very much indeed for making time for us this morning. We very much appreciate it. Thank you. Andrew Bridgen, MP for North West Leicestershire. Thank you very much indeed.
Always straight talking, and
Absolutely.
he proved to be so there.
Now, coming up, we'll be speaking to a Manchester mum who had one heck of a grand day out to Lanzarote. Oh, and the other thing is, it only cost 23 quid. See you in a minute.
Not bad.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
and right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 11:26. Absolutely avalanche of views about childcare and whether or not the state or the parent should be responsible for paying for childcare costs. I've never seen so many.
We didn't know what we started when we started this debate. Well, Martin says parents should not have children if they can't afford to bring them up. Why should my taxes be used to supplement childcare for other people? I don't even have children.
Andy says zero-cost childcare. One parent works in the days, one parent works evenings, nights or weekends. It's really that simple. And Rajia has a solution. He says the solution is obvious. Workplaces with over 50 people, as an example, should all have on-site creches. Everyone would then take their children to work with them all year round. So we didn't get that bit of the debate. Should it be the parents, the state, or the employer who's responsible for providing
Yeah, we'll start another road of avalanche now. From the business reading, say why it's there. Somebody else, Jack, saying, look, how do you balance your time? My mum worked a couple of jobs. She had 3 kids. She took no childcare back in the 60s. Just people now want everything from the state to pay on, to help them have another type of lifestyle. If you can't afford things, you shouldn't have things.
Mel says decades ago, all parents got was family allowance and the economy didn't collapse. It's not a person's right to have children. It's a lifestyle choice which I should not be contributing to. I guess I suppose the point on the other side, because they are pretty one-sided, these comments. So I suppose the point is that maybe years ago you could live on one wage in a family, and now it's much harder because of the house prices and things like that. It's much harder for one parent to stay at home and just live on one person's wage.
And that was the point. You might need 2 wages now to pay all your bills, whereas going back to 60s, 70s, one person could have.
Keep those views coming in, though.
Now, 2 mums have discovered a quick and cheap way to beat the January blues. It was a day trip to Lanzarote. They flew 2,500 miles for an epic day out in the Canary Islands, getting up at 3:45 and arriving back at their homes around midnight after snapping up flights for, yes, £23.
Rebecca, one of the mums from Manchester, whose savvy idea it was, joins us now. Thank you so much for joining us. What I want to know is, what did you do on your day trip to Lanzarote? What did you do when you got there?
Well, we'd thought about it ahead of time on those 4 hours on the flight and the day before, and we decided we needed to make a pit stop for lunch as our first arrival, and then we headed down into the shopping centre for a little child-free spree and enjoyed some drinks on the beach. We had a brilliant day. We loved the journey as much as we enjoyed our time in Lanzarote.
Now, what I'm wondering, were you looking to find a cheap deal? Were the two of you out looking to find a cheap deal? Or did you stumble across it and say, this is just too good to miss out on, and then planned the day away?
Well, as mums, we'd coordinated that we were going to go out on the Sunday, and we'd briefly said that we would go for bottomless brunch in Manchester. But I had been looking on the Skyscanner website for flights for our family for either the February half term or ahead across the year, and I just so happened to click on the Sunday and couldn't believe it when I'd seen the flights there and back on the same day, because we didn't want to leave our families for long, and it just meant that we could have an absolute whale of a time together and still be back to take the children to school on Monday.
It was probably cheaper than getting your train fare or whatever it was to Manchester, so you probably got a much better deal even on the transport costs.
So, Rebecca, would you do this again? I mean, have you now got your appetite whetted now, and are you now on the lookout for sort of more day trips by airline?
Absolutely. I think if the opportunity arises, and as a busy person you can squeeze that little bit of exotic sunshine in, or a nice city break, you should make the most of those 24 hours. Absolutely.
I think, Rebecca, there's a business model. I think you should start up a business of actually encouraging people where to go for the best day out, what the most exotic day out is. I think you're the person. You're obviously well organised and all the rest of it. Do you not think that something big could come from this, Rebecca?
Well, I would absolutely welcome it, and if anybody wants to get in touch with support.
So where? Oh, blobbing heck! I thought you were on a plane then for a second.
She was going down under. That was Australia trip.
So where are you looking for next? Have you got anywhere in mind that you fancy going to next for your next day trip?
Well, I think we'd really welcome a spa day first to recover from this one, and then we'll look going forward. Sorry, that's just dropped down there slightly. We would welcome another trip when everywhere gets a little bit warmer in Europe in the spring.
Well, Rebecca, I think it's absolutely fantastic. You are an inspiration to us all. We're looking at pictures at the moment of your trip, and I can certainly vouch for the fact it certainly looks a fantastic day. Thank you so much for joining us. And when you go on your next one, get in touch with us and tell us where you went and how much it cost. Oh, and we'll be following you with the camera crew. We'll get in on it as well. As a Yorkshireman, these kind of prices are what I'm looking for, to be honest, Rebecca. So any more suggestions you've got, I'll treat Esther to a day out somewhere, if she's lucky.
And come with us, Esther. We'll give you a shout.
Leave him at home. I'll just go with you, Rebecca. We'll sack him off.
Only mums, Esther. It's only mums.
Oh, I've been excluded. But I think what was great there, as said, was that how do you beat the January blues? Lots of people are saying, what can I do? I'm feeling down. The news is miserable. I'd like to do something else. And we've got Simon, haven't we, coming on a little bit later on. Simon Calder, who's going to tell us about cheap deals, what you can do, how you can get around. He'll be doing well to beat that one. Anyway, coming up with a football-filled weekend ahead, we'll be looking at some of the biggest stories from the world of sport and showbiz.
It's 11:33. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB newsroom. Flybe has cancelled all flights after collapsing, with the British airline going into administration. The UK Civil Aviation Authority is urging people who booked flights with the regional carrier not to travel to airports. Flybe returned to the skies last April after it collapsed in 2020 and was operating up to 530 flights per week across 23 routes. Graphic body cam footage has been released in the US showing police in Memphis beating a black man who died 3 days later. A warning, some people may find the following video distressing.
Mom! Mom! Give your hands!
29-year-old Tyree Nichols was kicked, punched and pepper-sprayed as he cried out for his mother. 5 black officers have been sacked and are facing murder charges. President Joe Biden says he's outraged and has called for an end to police misconduct.
We have don't shoot me dead, I got my hands above my head. Please don't shoot me dead, I got my hands above my head.
The video has triggered fresh protests against police brutality. Demonstrations, which were mostly peaceful, have been held across several cities, including Memphis and New York. In Times Square, 3 people were arrested after police cars were damaged. There's been another suspected Palestinian shooting in Jerusalem a day after 7 people were killed by a gunman outside a synagogue. 2 people were hurt in the latest attack. It comes after at least 9 Palestinians were killed on Thursday during a raid on the West Bank. The Israeli army has boosted its forces in the area. And Sir Keir Starmer has warned Labour members that action against anti-Semitism will continue, as he promised his party has reformed under his leadership. Addressing the London Labour conference, he said the message at the next general election must be that the party is different to the one that Britain rejected in 2019. He also vowed to build a fairer, greener country and told members not to be complacent. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. We'll get back to Esther and Phil in just a moment.
He's the king of breakfast TV and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous. Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 11:37. Well, before the break, we were certainly inspired by Rebecca to beat those January blues, weren't we? With her story of a bargain trip to Lanzarote. Well, joining us now is travel expert Simon Calder to give us his hot tips for snapping up the best flight deals and some reaction, which we'll do to the big news story.
I'm not having any luck actually hearing you. But hopefully you can hear me. And let me tell you about what's happening in Flybe at the moment. OK, so the first thing is I'm really, really sorry about the hundreds of people who are working for Flybe who have woken up this morning to discover that they have actually lost their jobs. It's an awful situation. And of course, it's just 3 years since Flybe Mark 1 collapsed. But what we've seen since then is, of course, the COVID crisis, which did so much damage to so many airlines, but also the original Flybe network has been pretty much filled in by other airlines. Companies such as Loganair, Eastern Airways, British Airways, Aer Lingus and EasyJet. As a result of that, anybody who finds that their flight is cancelled because Flybe's collapsed, and please don't go to the airport, will be able to find something pretty similar. And I've actually just been hearing from the airlines about the so-called rescue fares that they are offering. That's going to allow you, for instance, to travel on Ryanair. If you've got a forward booking from Belfast from late March onwards, that's going to be £30 across the Irish Sea to various points in GB. On top of that, British Airways offering £50 one-way flights plus taxis, but that includes a piece of luggage, and that's on the routes from London Heathrow to Newcastle to Amsterdam and to Belfast City. So you will be able to get where you need to be, but it is going to be a bit of a problem, of course, getting, forgive me, for people who are on some of the very few routes that they flew, which nobody else did. Having said that, I wouldn't fret if I were you. If you are looking at travelling much later on, you're probably going to get your money back from the bank, from the credit card company, from the debit card company, and that should mean that, well, hopefully you are going to be not out of pocket. You'll still be able to travel. It's going to reduce the number of companies and number of airlines out there, so prices will go up a bit. But frankly, the new Flybe is nothing like the old Flybe in terms of scale. So bluntly, other airlines are going to pick up all the passengers. They're going to pick up all the staff as well. BA and EasyJet already saying, please, if you work for Flybe, get in touch with us. We may have a job for you. And I'm afraid that will be the very last we will see of Flybe. It was already tarnished after the collapse. So coming back last April, as it did, was really quite ambitious.
Simon Calder, thank you very much indeed for giving us that update on Flybe. I can see that you're in. I can see that you're in Istanbul. I don't know if that's a day trip or not.
If he got the flight tickets for £23.
Exactly, he was doing well. Anyway, thank you for that.
And I
Simon.
think he had a little bit of difficulty hearing us there, but it gave us the update there on what's happening with Flybe. So thanks very much indeed, Simon.
Absolutely. Now, we're now joined by former England, Leeds and Sheffield Wednesday midfielder Carlton Palmer to take us through this weekend's FA Cup action. Carlton, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. I was watching Manchester City and Arsenal last night. It was quite an interesting game. I was interested that Manchester City seemed to play a full-strength team, which seems to be out of vogue at the moment. Was that a surprise to you too?
No, not really. Good morning. I wasn't surprised. Man City have got they've got an abundance of players, so they haven't got to worry about injuries or anything like that. So I wasn't surprised that Man City played a full-strength surge. I was surprised at Arsenal dropping so many players, dropping 6 players, but they haven't got the biggest of squads. So they've made a decision. We can see from that the priority is the league. But I thought Arsenal were the better side in the first half. And the deciding factor for me, which is a major problem for Arsenal, is that when Partey went off injured for the second half, Man City were comfortable in the game then and ran out comfortable winners.
Now, when you were in your heyday, Carlton, if I might describe it as that, you got to the FA Cup final with Sheffield Wednesday in 1993, I think it was. You must have had to negotiate some banana skins through on the road to Wembley. How difficult is it? I see there's some big games. You know, there's Wrexham are playing Sheffield United tomorrow. Accrington Stanley play in Leeds. How difficult is it as a top player when you get sent to one of these lower league grounds to try and get through to the next round?
It's very difficult because when you play at a big club, like say you play at Leeds United, the facilities are much different than at lower league clubs. I mean, I remember once at Leeds United when we had to play a lower league club, we actually changed at Ellen Road and went on the bus and just went straight on the pitch and played the game. It's very difficult. You've got to focus because they are difficult games. And, you know, if you're not prepared and you're fully focused, and you meet a side that, you know, if you're playing a Sheffield United, if you're playing a Burnley or somebody like that who banging form, then you can end up getting knocked out.
And what do you remember about that day at Wembley in 1993? I mean, the thing is that what I think is quite sad is that the FA Cup doesn't seem to have the same lustre that it used to. When you got to the final, it really was the biggest cup competition in the world. What's your memories of that FA Cup final?
Well, you see, what's happened in recent times, the Premier League clubs have targeted the Premier League and the Champions League and devalued the FA Cup or the Carling Cup or Emirates Cup, whatever you want to call it. And it's sad, really. And only when they haven't got a chance of winning the Champions League or winning the league, they start taking the cup competitions seriously. It's interesting this season, if you look at Manchester United, Ten Hag has said he's played a full-strength side. He wants to win a trophy because they're trophyless for, 40 years. So he wants to put a trophy back in the cabinet, and you see that a lot of clubs like Man City now, and they're playing full-strength side. For me, it was massive. I was brought up, I'm 57, I was brought up on FA Cup day, waking up in the morning, seeing the build-up, watching it all the way through. And that's the way I was. I wasn't brought up on the league. I was brought up on the FA Cup. And if you speak to anybody from my era, that's what it was all about. So it was a fantastic day, a fantastic experience. Unfortunately, on the day we lost to Arsenal, but that's the way it goes.
But now, talking of, you can tell by my accent, I love the Liverpool games, I love the Everton games, but the link here is, Everton is set to get a new manager replacing Frank Lampard.
Yeah, it was difficult for Frank. People don't, he's had to sell his best player. He kept them up last season. He's had to send his best player who went to Spurs. He's then had 1.8 million to spend in the transfer window, so it's really difficult for Frank. So they're going to make a change, but it's interesting. They're going to appoint Sean Dyche, and it's interesting. They're going to appoint a manager, which I thought they should have appointed a long time ago. They should have gone and got him. But you get managers who kind of have a stigma attached to them that, Sean's seen as a firefighter or with the lower leagues. Well, actually, he's done a fantastic job at Burnley. With the resources he's had, he's built the football club, and I think it'll be a fantastic appointment for them. And I think he'll keep in the division. And if you look at Nottingham Forest this season,
Aidan's desperate to get in here and ask a question as well.
Carlton, it's Aidan here. I just wanted to ask you, with your Leeds hat on, about the future of Jesse Marsch. He sounds a bit delusional in some of his post-match interviews lately. Do you think he's going to last much longer at Elland Road?
Well, it's interesting. They've just allowed him to bring in an assistant, haven't they? I think he's had a lot of endeavour there, and the players work extremely hard. But he hasn't done anything spectacular. He hasn't hit the heights of, say, a Bielsa. I know he kept him up that season, but I said Bielsa would have done that anyhow. I'm not convinced by him. I'm really not. I'll be interested to see if the owners, I think he'll keep him up this season but it'll be interesting to see what happens past the summer.
Carlton Palmer, thank you so much for taking the time this morning to join us. We really appreciate it. Reminiscing about the 1993 FA Cup final. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I'm looking forward to what's going to happen with Everton. Joining us now, though, to take us through the biggest showbiz stories of the week is Hayley Palmer, and also sport as well with Aidan McGee. So come on, Hayley, give us a bit of showbiz.
Well, I want to talk about Kelly Brook, because she's been in the tabloids this week saying that she feels a lot better in her 40s than what she did in her 20s. When you think about what she did in her 20s, well, she actually started her modelling career when she was 16. She did page 3 work. She was always in the FHM, being the sexiest woman in the world. And she probably had a lot of pressure on her to look a certain way. And she says she looks back at those photos and says, actually, I didn't feel good then. I was always on a diet and I felt miserable. And now I'm in my 40s. She's married Jeremy and she's really happy. And she says that it's like a relief. And I think there is so much pressure in your 20s. You don't really know who you are. I mean...
And equally, she was very famous, and then she was doing The Big Breakfast, wasn't she?
Yes.
On Channel 4. Big leap forward for her, and I think it was a lot to take in, and I think she had a tough time there. I thought she was brilliant. I've got a lot of time for her, but it was difficult. So I could see now why she say, I'm confident, I know what I'm doing, I've got what I want. So good for her.
Do you think, Hayley, that when you get into your 40s, you'll be happier than you were in your...
Yeah, when I get into my 40s, I'll be a lot happier, but that's a long time yet, so we don't need to worry about that. But she's also put her name up to present Romance Retreat, which is the Love Island for the over 40s. She said, I really want to do that. So I think she'd be great. I quite like her bubbly person.
Maybe Aidan can tell us how happy you are when you're in your 60s.
I was just about to say how charming you were, actually. You're going to reverse it all with that. Goodness me.
Yeah, were you happier in your 40s than your 20s, Aidan? Do you think?
No, I was happy in my 20s. Also happy in my 40s. Had a pretty good 30s. I enjoyed my teens as well, thank you.
Yeah. What's happening?
He's just happy.
Yeah, exactly.
He's just a joke-telling, happy kind of guy.
What's happening in the tennis? Can you tell us
in the
anything
tennis?
about the
Yeah,
tennis?
we've just had a result with the women's singles final. So Elena Rybakina took the first set, but she was superseded by Arina Sabalenka, 6-4, 3-6, 4-6. So huge result that for Sabalenka, because Rybakina was the favourite, and she'd been number 22 seed as well, because she had points from winning Wimbledon last year weren't allocated to her ranking, which meant that she had to be ranked at number 22. So she got a really hard run through, but it's finished today. As I say, she lost in 3 sets. Should also mention Alfie Hewitt, British success down under. He's won the wheelchair singles as well, his 7th Grand Slam title. He's from Norwich. So he lost the last 2 finals. He's beaten Takita Oda, and so hell of a morning for him.
And the men's final tomorrow?
Indeed, yeah. Novak Djokovic against Stefanos Tsitsipas. I think Djokovic will be fired up after what happened last year, but I wouldn't rule out Tsitsipas. He's won 10 matches in a row in January.
Oh.
Now...
Hayley, deal or no deal?
Oh, the best news ever is that it's coming back. I'm living for this. I used to absolutely love it. Aidan told me earlier that he loved Noel's house party, didn't you?
Yeah, I quite like Noel's house party.
Did you? You didn't put a bid in when he was doing Mr. Blobby online selling it?
I do know someone, an old colleague of mine lived next door to the creator of Mr. Blobby.
Really?
Bit of trivia for
I mean, we love your fun facts. But anyways, coming back, and the host is going to be Stephen Mulhern. So I'm very happy. I think he'd be really, really good at that role. So bring it on. It's coming back after 7 years. They're recording 20 episodes. It's going on to ITV, and my life is now very complete with that news.
And somebody who's looking for a deal might not get one. Rick Astley there suing a young rapper.
Yes,
What's
I
this
actually
about?
have listened, or I've watched the video, and it's not good what he's done. Like, for me, those iconic songs you just don't play around with. They are brilliant as they are, as an original.
Really? Yes, but...
Yes, Rick Astley never going to give you up.
I'm with you.
Thank you, Esther.
Hang on.
I'm sure about that.
But there was a controversy in the late 80s where Kylie Minogue came out of Neighbours. She came to Britain, recorded I Should Be So Lucky. She was in the same Stock Aitken and Waterman stable. Yes. There was a controversy at the time that when you slowed the song down, it was Rick Astley's voice. The suggestion was that it was just Rick Astley's voice sped up.
I think you're just starting.
No, I'm not.
There.
Yeah, anyway,
one of his songs.
No.
You don't mess with that song. And speaking of Stock Aitken and Waterman, there is a series at the moment. It's part 2 tonight, and it's a fly-on-the-wall documentary on Channel 5, and it's just brilliant. Part 1 was last week. I loved it.
So what did they say? So what are they doing? What are they talking about in the document?
They're reminiscing, going back through all the Stock Aitken and Waterman magic that there was, because everything they touched turned to gold. I mean, they had hit after hit after hit with your Kylies, your Jasons, your Sunitas, your Rick Astleys. You know, it was good time.
Brother Beyond.
Positive, or is there any bust-ups in there? Any deals that did happen? Is that what we're going to look into?
Yeah, no, it's good to see what happened behind the scenes, because obviously there was a lot of magic happening, but also a few things going on there. So definitely tune into that's one to watch tonight.
And you had an encounter with the Beast.
Yes, from The Chase. Yes, well, I met him.
Did he put you through your paces?
I told him I was an 80s music genius, which is probably the wrong thing to say to someone like the Beast from The Chase. And we recorded something from my show where he asked me questions from the 80s. Let's just say I wasn't as good as I thought I was.
Well, you wanted it to be multiple choice, didn't you?
Yeah, I made him change it to multiple choice. So
out of, like, maybe the 5 or 10 questions, how many did you get right?
I got 4 out of 5, so actually...
that's good.
I was sweating. I had to put deodorant on afterwards because I was like, the pressure got to me.
Anyway, let's have a prediction from you, Aidan. What's going to be the biggest shock in the FA Cup this weekend?
I think Accrington might turn Leeds over.
Really?
Actually, I do.
Now,
it's 1-0.
Right, I love this kind of David Goliath story, the sort of small local club beating the big club.
But what does everyone know about Accrington Stanley for, though?
That advert.
The Milk Marketing Board, 1989, yeah.
But I think the teams in the top league who lose to lower league teams, they should have a week's wages deduction. If you're in the Premier League, you shouldn't be losing to a team in.
And give it to the team you've lost to, because it would mean a lot to them. Aidan, thank you very much indeed. Hayley, thank you very much indeed. I can't believe we've come to the end of the show. Thanks for being with us. Loads of views still coming in. We will see you next week, and up next is Alistair and friends. Don't go anywhere.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry. It has been a fairly cloudy start to the weekend for us, but some of us at least will see some brighter spells during today. The boundary line for that is this cold front that's slowly sinking southwards. It will bring some light and patchy rain and drizzle to coast of Wales and into central England as it does move southwards. But it is the southern half of that where it is going to remain fairly cloudy, Wales, central southern England. To the north for Northern Ireland, north-east England and also into parts of Scotland, we could see some brighter spells throughout the second half of the day. Temperatures for all of us, though, are going to remain fairly steady around 7 or 8 degrees, and with the light winds we have across all of the UK, we'll hopefully be able to make the most of that. Into this evening, though, the winds are going to start to strengthen across northwest Scotland in particular, but remaining fairly light elsewhere. The band of patchy rain and drizzle continuing to push its way across Wales and into other areas of England. The clearer intervals we had across the north will tend to fill their way in, so whilst we could see a patchy frost develop during the evening, temperatures will tend to rise again a bit as we move into the second half of the night. So remaining frost-free for most of us to start off Sunday, but it's going to be a particularly blustery one across the northwest with a more expansive area of rain moving its way in. This could be heavy at times. That will gradually push its way southwards into Scotland and Northern Ireland, behind which we'll see some fairly blustery showers. For England and Wales, it will remain largely dry once those patches of drizzle clear their way off, but again, it's going to be another pretty cloudy day, temperatures around 7 or 8 degrees. Into Sunday evening, then, that frontal system continued to push its way southwards. Behind that, again, is where we'll see some of the clearer spells develop, but it is going to remain pretty blustery, 50-mile-an-hour gusts across some coastal areas of Scotland. And winds will remain a feature across the north as we move into the coming week, so do stay up to date with the forecast, particularly into Wednesday.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, at 9:30 on Sunday morning when I'll be asking Jacob Rees-Mogg whether the government is making the best of Brexit. I'll also be joined by Boris Johnson's former economics advisor Gerard Lyons to discuss Jeremy Hunt's decision not to cut taxes. And leading feminist Julie Bindel will be telling me why she thinks Nicola Sturgeon is a disgrace to women. All that and more at 9:30 tomorrow.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome. I'm Alastair Stewart, and for the next 2 hours, I'll be keeping you company here on TV and radio with the stories that matter across the country. And we have plenty coming up, including how impressed or otherwise were you with the Chancellor's speech yesterday on growth? Well, business groups were pretty scornful. I'll be asking wealth creators from home and abroad what he could and indeed what he should have said. Are you confident in his going for growth stance? We'd really love to hear your thoughts. We'll also be getting all of the political latest reaction and developments from the London Labour conference. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of the day's news. Here's Bethany Elsey.
Alistair, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just gone 12 o'clock. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Flybe has cancelled all flights after collapsing, with the British airline going into administration. The UK Civil Aviation Authority is urging people who booked flights with the regional carrier not to travel to airports. Flybe returned to the skies last April after it collapsed in 2020 and was operating up to 530 flights per week across 23 routes. The government says its immediate priority is to support staff and those who've been left stranded, while travel expert Simon Calder says hundreds of people have lost their jobs.
I have a great deal of sympathy for the thousands of people booked today to fly on Flybe who are now having to make other plans. Do not go to the airport is the message from the Civil Aviation Authority. But also, of course, for the hundreds of staff who are waking up to discover the airline they worked with until yesterday no longer exists.
Graphic body cam footage has